Welcome back to the Kino Cave, everybody, and Phase 2 of the Kinospective begins today with Iron Man 3. Now, I've always had a special place in my heart for Iron Man 3. The Iron Man trilogy, I guess you call it, is possibly my favorite trilogy in the MCU purely for the character of Tony Stark, and I really like his journey across all three films. They're not perfect. This movie is certainly not perfect. It's got a lot of weak aspects in the writing of it, but we'll get to that later. I still really love Tony's journey across these three films, as well as the little blip in the Avengers movie. And in a lot of ways, it feels like it should have ended here, but we've got more stories to tell, I suppose. And we still do, even 13 years later. Also, I love the fact that this is kind of like a Christmas movie. It's, set around Christmas time. I always like watching this one around Christmas. It just, I don't know, feels really good. More MCU stuff should be set around Christmas. But if you've been watching this channel for a while, then you know how much I love Christmas. Without further ado, let's get into the behind-the-scenes information. Kevin Feige thought that it was a unique idea to have this act as a sequel to the Avengers as well as Iron Man 2. I totally understand that. I think that in a lot of aspects, the MCU's sort of everything needs to be connected and every character needs to cameo in another character's movie. It can get really messy and bogged down and take away from the actual story and plot of the film, but it does make a lot of sense in this specific film because Tony's met aliens now. It starts to become a problem, I think, in, say, the Captain America trilogy or the Spider-Man Home trilogy, where they're just three films that have the same title as the header, but are barely connected in any way. So Robert Downey Jr. is clearly much more involved in the creative process. He's introducing Shane Black as the director, as he did with Jon Favreau in Iron Man 2. But in Iron Man 2, him and Jon Favreau were a team already from the first Iron Mans, whereas now it's very much, this is Robert Downey Jr.'s baby, and he's bringing on Shane Black just to add his specific directorial flair to it. There's even clips of Robert going over clips and dailies and previs scenes and discussing how Tony would move and act in those scenes. He's clearly much more hands-on at this point. This version of Tony Stark is his character at this point. So the first sequence that was storyboarded and put through the previs was the attack on the house in Malibu. They did change the interior of Tony's house just slightly to make it look different but familiar, like a bit of an evolution from the previous films. And that's very clear. The basic setup and layout of the house is the same, but it does feel a bit more updated since 2010. Yes, 2010. 2009. 2010. The VFX supervisor, Christopher Townsend, wanted the entire interior of the Stark mansion to be completely practical so that they could actually have, like, say, parts of the house crack and fall out because it's on a cliffside. So the house, part of the house would tip as it's being destroyed and parts of the floor would fall away. They wanted to do all of that practically. So they built a model of the house in a giant soundstage. And then, of course, the exterior of the house is completely green screen, which makes sense. There's helicopters and action and stuff happening outside the house during that scene. So, yeah, completely makes sense. It's fun to see them still doing a lot of practical stuff in these movies. Something that, as we go through Phase 2 and more so in Phase 3, we're going to start seeing less of. Another little fun fact about the Stark Mansion set. The giant rabbit that Tony buys for Pepper Potts for Christmas, that is outside the mansion, but then they knock a hole in the wall, I guess, and put it inside. That rabbit has got tiny little hands sticking out of its side, or kind of side to chest, and they used CGI to add little fingernails and claws and stuff and stuff to those tiny little hands to make them obviously tiny little hands, because when they were going over the dailies, it looked like the rabbit just had big boobs on it, which is very funny, and actually something that when I was sitting down with my girlfriend watching this, she pointed out that the rabbit's hands looked like boobs. And I never realized that in any of my watches, but watching it with her and her pointing it out, and then watching the Blu-ray commentary with Shane Black and Drew Pearce, the writers of the movie, they pointed it out as well. So I guess I'm just an idiot, or clearly the CGI worked, because I never thought they were anything other than tiny little hands. Also, Pepper wearing the Iron Man suit was an idea that they had since the second film. This is kind of a thing that you see a lot with Iron Man sometimes in the comic books, mostly with Rhodey, but also in some of the cartoons as well, where the Iron Legion becomes a thing and everybody he knows has an Iron Man suit and helps him fight crime and stuff. So yeah, it makes sense that they had plans from Iron Man 1 with Rhodey and Iron Man 2 with Pepper to have them wear their own Iron Man suits. And this is obviously something that would really come to fruition in Avengers Endgame with the rescue armor, but we're not there yet. So the town of Rose Hill, Tennessee, that we spend about an hour in this movie, was filmed in a real town that they actually called Rose Hill. So the town was called Rose Hill, and they really liked the look of the water tower in the background, so they figured we'll just call this town, this fictional town, Rose Hill as well. I can't remember what state that the real Rose Hill is in, but they did change it to Tennessee and, you know, add all the snow and stuff like that. And the film was originally going to open with Tony landing in Tennessee with, you know, the armor powering down and all that, and then we were going to cut back to the real beginning of the movie as a homage to the very first Iron Man, to mirror that. Because, of course, in the first Iron Man, we open with him captured and taken to the cave, and then we cut back and we see what led to him going there in the first place. Tony dragging the suit through the snow in Tennessee is a direct homage to Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life, where there's a similar looking scene of Jimmy Stewart running through the snow. And I never really thought about that there are a lot of Christmassy references in this movie that I will get to later on as well. I never really got that, but now that it's pointed out to me, yeah, it looks a lot like a scene from It's a Wonderful Life. And the pretty famous shot, and they use it in a lot of the marketing for this movie back in 2013, of Pepper holding the Iron Man helmet to her head. This shot right here is a direct reference to a documentary about Ayrton Senna, who was a stunt driver or a race car driver or something like that. I don't know anything about, you know, racing or Formula 1 or anything like that, so forgive me for getting some of these facts wrong, but he basically died in a car crash, and there is a very famous image of his sister holding his helmet to her head that they directly homage in this movie. So that's kind of a cool idea, and yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly iconic image now from this film, so it's a great shot. I love it. Now let's get on to the biggest talking point when it comes to Iron Man 3, the Mandarin twist. In case you haven't seen the film in a while and don't follow the MCU that closely, but you're watching this video anyway, essentially the twist in the movie is that there is this terrorist named the Mandarin, who is based on a real Marvel Comics character that is widely regarded as one of Iron Man's best arch enemies. And it was a big, exciting thing to have the Mandarin, you know, Iron Man's main villain really, to be in this movie. So they reimagined him as a Middle Eastern terrorist who is, you know, setting off bombs and stuff all over America, and he's played by Ben Kingsley, which is really cool. Love Ben Kingsley. The twist, though, is that the real villain, Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce, has actually recruited an actor by the name of Trevor Slattery. He is as British as the day is long. His Lear was the toast of Croydon, apparently. They set him up to be a sort of scapegoat, as the face of the Mandarin, while the attacks are actually being done by Aldrich Killian. And this upset a lot of people, because essentially this means that this guy that they kind of made up, or I'm not even sure is Aldrich Killian a comic books character, the image to my left will tell you whether or not he originated in the comic books. It was very disappointing for a lot of people that this incredibly iconic archenemy of Iron Man was set up to be just Guy Pearce behind it all. Now, because I don't really get into this in the review section, I will just say right off the bat that I don't really care about the Mandarin twist. He was kind of an incredibly offensive character anyway from the 60s, so it doesn't really bother me that much. Also, they do the Mandarin properly in Shang-Chi. I know that came out years and years later, but I think to have a character like this be cast as an Asian person in an Asian-led film directed by an Asian director is probably better than having it being done by Shane fucking Black. So, all in all, I think it works out. Ben Kingsley is fucking hilarious in this movie and never ceases to crack me up whenever I watch it. So, also, because I live in Ireland and I'm so close to the UK, and like soccer culture is like a big thing here as well as, you know, in England. I've met like 1,000 Trevor Slatterys, so I think it just makes me, you know, it reminds me of home a little bit. So yeah, I don't mind the Mandarin twist. I think it's alright. It never really bothered me. Now let's hear Shane Black. Shane Black defended this decision on the Blu-ray commentary by saying he still gave the audience the iconic Mandarin that they've been waiting for since Iron Man 1, because the 10 Rings, you know, the terrorist group in Iron Man 1 and now in Iron Man 3 as well, that is based on the fact that the villain, the Mandarin, has 10 magic rings on his fingers. So Shane Black insists that he still gave people the Mandarin that they wanted, and it's just the face of Aldrich Killian. Aldrich Killian, as he says at the end of the movie, is the Mandarin. He's the real version of that character. And Ben Kingsley is just the outward expression of Aldrich's evil. Which I totally understand from a writing perspective. When you forget about the fact that this is an adaptation of a comic book and that nerds are going to get mad no matter what you do, yeah, this is a pretty awesome twist and a really fun idea to have your villain project all his outward theatrical villainy onto a scapegoat. That's really interesting, I think. But the other voice on the Blu-ray commentary, Drew Pearce, who co-wrote the film with Shane Black, had this to say on the Mandarin twist. So the original Mandarin from the comic books, and this is the thing about Iron Man comics. Now, I haven't read a lot of Iron Man comics, but I have watched YouTube videos of a lot of people who have read Iron Man comic books. Shout out to Godzilla Mendoza for educating me on Iron Man. Iron Man has been a character since his inception as basically a weapon of war against whatever America's political arch-enemy was at the time. In the 60s, Iron Man was fighting the communists overseas, and now he fights terrorists. It's a running theme throughout his comic books and as well in these movies. The Mandarin is a character, a very, very racist character, born out of America's fear of communists, specifically Asian communists, Chinese and Korean and Japanese, from the 1960s. That's why he's got the big Fu Manchu mustache. And this is not the only piece of media from the 60s to have done this. It is all over American cinema and media in general, fighting the commies in the 60s. This continued into the 80s with Russia as well. The point is, the Mandarin was born out of that. And so this Mandarin is born out of what's America fearing in the late 2000s and early 2010s? The Middle Eastern terrorists. Since 9/11, that's what America's been fighting. And cinema has also reflected that. Look at any Michael Bay movie. So Drew Pearce claims that the Mandarin in this movie is essentially just the evolution of what the Mandarin was in the comic books in the 60s. Which I think is a great idea, honestly. I think that that's a terrific idea. It's taking a character that really isn't anything and evolving it into something interesting. Again, nerds are going to complain no matter what you do. If you change too much, they're going to complain. If everything stays the same, they'll complain even more. Moving on from the Mandarin. Of course, I had to waste a ton of time talking about the Mandarin. I was not going to talk about it this much in this video because every fucker has talked about it on this goddamn internet. So, moving on from that, Shane Black was against Jarvis talking all the time. He didn't like that in the first two Iron Man movies, Jarvis just talked all the time without any point to it. It's clear from this commentary that Shane Black hates kind of guff and wasted time, because he also says that he hates what he called connecting scenes, where you need to, it's an entire scene dedicated to establishing where a character is going to be in the next scene, or where he came from in the previous scene. And I totally understand that from a writing perspective. You want to pace your movie and have it flow in a nice, even way. You don't want any wasted space in the script. So he made sure to only have Jarvis talk when it was absolutely necessary for the plot or the script or, you know, certain scenes. I find that really interesting that Shane Black was so against Jarvis talking, because Jarvis talking was a workaround from Iron Man 1, and I think parts of Iron Man 2 as well, where they had to cut scenes for time and pace, and the information given in those scenes would just be relayed through Jarvis after the fact. So, used as a crutch in Iron Man 1 to being used only when necessary in Iron Man 3. Another fun thing is the Air Force One sequence. There's a whole 10 minutes behind the scenes video that I highly recommend you check out. It's on YouTube, it's on the Blu-ray, of the Air Force One sequence. And it's actually incredible how they pulled this off practically, or at least as practically as they did. I'll start off by saying, yes, they used CGI for the Iron Man suit, filling in some people's faces and hands, changing the background, moving things around, that kind of thing. But otherwise, this was done entirely practically. They got a skydiving stunt team to jump out of planes. They wore costumes that reflected what the characters will be wearing in the movie, with hidden parachutes hidden in under the costumes. A cameraman, a guy wearing a fucking GoPro on his head, would jump out of the plane. A guy wearing a Iron Man morph suit jumped out of the plane. And all our skydiving team, wearing their more accurate costumes with the hidden parachutes, would jump out of the plane. And the guy with the GoPro would film them as the rest of the skydiving team pretended like they were actually falling out of a plane with no parachutes. It's really fascinating, and I will not be able to do this justice. Please watch that behind the scenes video and listen to the experts talk about it, because it is genuinely fascinating. And of course, for the bit at the end of that sequence when Tony has them all linked together like a barrel of monkeys and drops them into the water, obviously the skydiving team didn't do that. They used a zip line and had our CGI Iron Man on a zip line and all the rest of the cast on connecting zip lines and lowered them into the water that way. It was really cool to watch. I'm amazed that they got as much of that as practically as possible. Really, really cool stuff. And finally, the Iron Legion sequence at the end, which again, I don't really talk about this much in my review, so I will say right now, this is one of my favorite Iron Man scenes or sequences of all time. I love the Iron Legion. All 40 of Iron Man's suits coming to help out. I love the designs of all these suits. I will dedicate an entire video just to talking about each individual Iron Man suit design. The fact that they actually designed 42 Iron Man suits, or just less than that, because that's including all the suits from previous movies. It's so cool, and the VFX artists put a lot of work into creating them in CGI, because obviously you can't build 40 practical Iron Man suits. So all of these are stuntmen in mocap suits, and they put a lot of work into making them look as practical as possible, even though they couldn't be, which I respect highly. It's such a great sequence. I love it so much. I love the designs of all the armors. The Igor, the Heartbreaker, the Silver Centurion. Brilliant. I love these suits. And that is it for the behind the scenes information. Time to get into my review. My voice is going. We're at the ass end of another heat wave in Ireland, and I am sweating. There's bullets of sweat coming off of my face right now, and I really hope it doesn't show up on camera that much. So let's get into my review. Of Iron Man 3. Now, since my Iron Man 1 and 2 video, I took 3 case studies from each film to show why I love them so much. So I had to continue the theme this time, guys. I'm going to take 3 case studies of scenes that I love from this movie, and I will talk a little bit extra. I've talked about the Mandarin twist. I've talked about some of my favorite moments. I will say, as a criticism right now, the writing is not great. It's a bit all over the place. Characters dip in and out. There's not a great balance of characters, and it is really obvious that Maya was supposed to be a more present villain in the movie, but she's barely present at all in this movie. Other than that, I like it. Aldrich Killian isn't the best villain in the world, but I like Guy Pearce. He's very charismatic. So my criticism with this movie is largely just with the writing. I think it could have been a little bit tighter. Now let's get into 3 scenes that I love from this movie. And these 3 scenes are all concerning the character of Harley Keener, who is our little mini Iron Man that Tony hangs around with for a little bit. I really love this aspect of the Blu-ray commentary from Shane Black and Drew Pearce, where they talked about how Harley is Tony's ghost of Christmas past. So my first case study is Tony and Harley meeting. The scene begins with one of my favorite shots in any Iron Man movie. Tony and the suit sitting together, scuffed, worn, haggard, just tired from battle. This suit has become a weight on Tony's shoulders rather than this exciting thing that we flew around with in Iron Man 1. I love this shot so much. And then upon meeting Harley, Tony, of course, establishes a connection through talking tech. As I said in my first two Iron Man videos, this is how he bonds with Yinsen in the cave. It's how he bonds with, or attempts to bond with, Vanko in the prison. And of course, this is how he tries to bond with Harley at first, by criticizing his potato gun. I love how Shane Black and Drew Pearce continued the narrative that Jon Favreau set up in the first two Iron Man movies, where Tony's connection to his technology and the things that he's created is more deep than his connection to his actual loved ones like Rhodey or Pepper. If you'll remember from my Iron Man 1 video, I mentioned that it felt like Tony's strongest friendship in that movie was with Dummy and You, the two robot helpers that he has in his garage. And this is clearly presented in this movie as well, considering he spends more time in his garage tinkering, making Iron Man suits than he does with Pepper or Rhodey or Happy. And this is exemplified in this scene with the line of, I built him, I take care of him, and I'll fix him. Because his connection to his Iron Man suits is stronger than anything. And of course, like with our previous scenes as well, when Harley starts to bring up his terrible home life, which is all too familiar to Tony, a missing dad, not present mother, a kid who's just trying to survive day to day building his technology in his garage. But Tony completely shuts off, he makes jokes, he makes little jabs because he does not want to open up to this kid. The second scene between Tony and Harley, the scene with the shadows. I love the design of this memorial in this scene, how the shadows are set up and how the bomb site is still there in the center. But the aspect about it that I really love, and it's an ever-present thing throughout this movie when Tony is without his suit and without all his gadgets and his tech. I love how the design of this memorial reflects his hologram crime scene that he has from earlier on in the movie, and his kind of hologram setup that he has in his garage in the previous movies. It kind of looks like that, the way the flowers are arranged and the shadows are set up. It looks kind of like his hologram room. And like the Ghost of Christmas Past with Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, Harley tries to force Tony to relive his past by bringing up New York, and Tony completely rejects the idea and creates distance. I love how when he starts to have his attack, but just before then, we get nice close-up shots of their faces as they discuss the shadows. But when Tony's anxiety attack begins to come in, he gets up and creates distance from the audience and from Harley as well. Really well made scene, and again, I love how this reflects other Christmas stories. And the third scene, when he is on the phone to Harley, opening with a great joke about Harley eating so much candy that he can barely see straight, and Tony just waving it off, because of course. But a running theme in the MCU that we will see a lot in the next movie that Tony Stark is in, Tony uses his inventions to try and protect everything around him. In Age of Ultron, he literally wants to put a suit of armor around the world, to use his words. He makes suits for all of his family, he makes suits for himself, he makes suits that can go into space and turn invisible and do everything like that. He is constantly trying to use these inventions to protect what he cares about, even if that's just himself. So his anxiety attack comes when he realizes that he still doesn't have access to the armor. Harley then reminds him that it was never the armor that got him out of the cave or helped him create a new element. It was his intelligence and creativity that got him out of these situations. It wasn't just the armor that got him to fight aliens. It was his willingness to make the sacrifice play and send the nuke up through the wormhole. And Harley reminds him of this by saying, well, you're a mechanic, why don't you just build something to help you? And then we get into that great montage of him going to just like a regular, I don't know, in Ireland we would call it like a B&Q or something like that. I guess in America it'd be like a department store or maybe a shop where you buy like stuff for your house. And so those are my 3 case studies as to why I love specifically the relationship between Tony and Harley, but also just 3 scenes that I love in this movie that I wanted to dig into, because I like the idea of my Iron Man reviews having case studies, 3 case studies as to why I love them so much. But now I will end this on a little criticism that I have of the trilogy in general and a criticism that I have of the MCU. I do want to make a dedicated video to this, but if I'm going to do that, I'm going to want to use the music and stuff like that, so maybe I'll do that for Avengers Doomsday. I'll see. But for this film, and I will bring it up in future MCU videos as well, because we're in phase 2 now, we're getting sequels, and it starts to become a problem here, really. I wanted to talk Marvel's music problem. So briefly, the MCU tends to not carry over its musical motifs and specific themes for characters across multiple movies. This isn't the case every time. The Avengers movies consistently use the incredible Avengers theme from Alan Silvestri, and that's become iconic now, so it'd be criminal not to. The Spider-Man trilogy were all scored by Michael G. Kino, so of course that has a consistent and excellent musical score across all 3 films because Michael G. Kino's the best. And even the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies still have recurring themes. So in Iron Man 1 we get a musical score by Ramin Djawadi. And I love him, I love his work on Game of Thrones as well, and I think that this is still the best Iron Man music. It combines the best parts of like the heroism aspect to it with the horns and the strings, but then also using a ton of percussion instruments to make it feel like we're building these armors with Tony. So I love that. I love his theme. I still listen to Driving with the Top Down in the car when it's sunny outside and I have the windows all the way down. Great theme. So then John Debney came in to do Iron Man 2 and did not retain any of Ramin Djawadi's scores. Oh, by the way, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing all these people's names right. Now, this wasn't a huge deal because we still got the AC/DC songs, which kind of worked as Iron Man's musical themes, but I still lament that we never got Ramin Djawadi's theme coming back. And Debney tries to kind of recreate it in a lot of ways, but I just don't think it succeeds. No hate to any of these people. I love all their work on other stuff, but it's just not it. And then Brian Tyler comes in to do Iron Man 3's musical score and completely changes it again. Again, there's a couple of tracks that kind of faintly homage Ramin Djawadi's work on Iron Man 1, but this is a completely different score. And I actually really like the Iron Man theme in this score. It used to be my favourite, but I've circled back to the one from Iron Man 1. I just find that music is so important to a lot of these movies, especially these kind of feel-good blockbuster movies. When these movies don't have a consistent musical follow-through, it can make certain moments not as impactful. Can you imagine Iron Man 2 and 3 where we keep Ramin Djawadi's Iron Man score? It would have been incredible. And again, I want to make a video about this, about the MCU in general, where I will use the music, and I will bring this up again. But I just wanted to talk, since this is the 3rd film in this trilogy and we don't get another solo Iron Man movie after this. And of course, none of the music from Iron Man 1, 2 or 3 is retained in any of the Avengers movies, aside from one moment in Avengers Age of Ultron, which I'll talk about when I get to that movie. I just find that these movies could actually be improved at least 30% on all of them if there was a follow-through with the musical scores. Maybe that's just me because I love film music, but let's be honest, which score for a trilogy are you going to listen to more often? Lord of the Rings or the Iron Man trilogy? So, as my camera dies, let me talk about the budget of this movie, $200 million, and the box office was $1.2 billion. We are entering the era of the 2010s where everyone wants to be the Avengers. Every single movie studio wants to build a cinematic universe of loosely connected movies and then bring them all together in a team up, because even after the hype of the Avengers, Iron Man 3 was the one that made the most money of all 3 of these movies, and thus far is the 2nd highest grossing MCU movie. But that just goes to show how much audience goodwill has been built by just 6 or 7 movies at this point. It is incredible, and we're going to be talking big numbers for a lot of these movies. Is Iron Man 3 the best Iron Man movie or MCU movie? Absolutely not. But it's the highest grossing Iron Man film. And so, That was Iron Man 3, guys. I am still super pumped about doing the MCU Kinospective, so I hope you stick around to hear me talk about Thor the Dark World in 4 weeks. I'm super excited to revisit that movie, so please, if you like this video, give it a like. Comment below what you think of Iron Man 3. What's your favorite Iron Man movie? Or what's your favorite Tony Stark moment in the MCU? And if you like these videos, you want to see more from the Kinospective, subscribe so that you see when the next video goes up. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you in the movies.